Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto looked at him in pure silence for what seemed like an eternity. His glowing lightning eyes bore into the boy as if judging his worth. Seeing what lied in the boy's heart. It affected Gaara greatly and he didn't like it. Answer me, shouted out Gaara Aegean. How many? Said Naruto. Gaara looked at him confused. How many have you Gaara? With your demon how many hundreds died? How many thousands do you think my demon? How many husbands, wives, families have they taken Gaara? Gaara sat there in silence staring at the hooded stranger. They have every right to hate us, the most we can do is live with it and do all we can to repent. But why? We didn't ask for this, why must we repent? Because Gaara, if we don't, who will? Gaara looked at him again, tears started to form in his eyes at all the pain he had suffered in his life. If they hate us and we hate them, all there is an endless cycle of pain. But if we end it, if we love them and help them, then maybe, it might become easier to bear. I can't, the pain, it's too much, said Gaara clutching his head. He remembered it all, the fearful stares, children being pulled away from him, the children who called him a monster. It all hurt him so much. Then maybe you should just die here, said Naruto as he picked up his sword and walked over to Gaara. Gaara stared up at him, tears in his eye. He closed them and awaited death, but it never came. Gaara opened his eyes and looked behind him and saw the black-clad figure walking away. His wings still extend to his side, making him look holy. Why don't you me? You said it yourself, I should just die, said Gaara. Naruto looked back at him and smiled, not that Gaara could see it. Because I got a feeling that things are going to change for you, that is if you let them, said Naruto. He then flew off away from Gaara. Mere moments later both cages appeared with Anbu and Junin. Gaara, said the cage as he rushed over to his son. He stopped a couple of feet away from him, knowing that Gaara wouldn't let him get too close. Dad, you said my seal could be fixed, when can that happen? Asked Gaara in all sincerity. The cage took a step back in surprise, but then a small smile crept on his face. Are you sure? Said the cage. It is a matter for the future, but one that will serve to strengthen the bond between our villages, said the Hokage. She won't take it too well, she's kind of hot-headed. As I said, it is a matter for the future, said the Hokage. The cage nodded and entered the carriage where his son was waiting for him. The Hokage gave a wave as the carriage retreated from the entrance of the village back the way it came. So Hinata, will you go out with me? Asked Kiba, holding his head high, sticking his chest out. The Hyuga just looked at her teammate as they made their way towards the Hokage's office. I'm sorry Kiba-kun, but there is someone I already like, said Hinata. Kiba hung his head low, but then brought it back up with determination in his eyes. It's that arrogant Sasuke, isn't it? Said Kiba. I swear I'll throttle him. Hinata began to giggle. No, I'm sorry, it's not Sasuke, said Hinata with a smile. Kiba suddenly looked very confused. Wah, if not Sasuke, then who? I'm sorry, but at the risk of you attempting to throttle that person, I think I'll keep it a secret, said Hinata. Kiba once again hung his head and fell back towards his other teammate Shino. I told you she wouldn't say yes, said the usually stoic boy. I know, but I couldn't resist. I mean, look at that, said Kiba, developing a blush and drool at the sight of his teammates behind. He was smacked over the head by his sensei that was currently behind the two of them. That's probably the reason she said no, said Kurenai. The team made its way up the Hokage Tower into the mission debriefing room. Inside the room, Team 7 was waiting. Kiba looked at his female teammate and noticed she had a faint blush on her cheeks. He followed her gaze and his eyes widened in surprise at what he saw. Apparently Hinata was staring at Haruno Sakura. What? Holy $. She's gay, thought Kiba as his mouth hung wide open and a tremendous blush formed on his cheeks. But of course that is the only logical explanation. I mean, why else would she refuse to go out with a stud like me? However, if Kiba had come out of his fantasies and took time to think about the situation logically, he would have noticed a few things. The first being that Team 7 was currently standing in a straight line all next to each other. The second being that since she and him were standing in different positions, they both had different views from different angles. What he saw as her staring at Sakura, she was actually looking at a certain blonde-haired boy with sunglasses. Ah, Team 8 has arrived, now we can begin giving you your joint assignment, said the old man Hokage. All people in the room eyes widened. Team 7 and Team 8 will escort a bridge builder as well as protect him on this C-class mission. As the Hokage began discussing the details, Kiba began whispering to his teammate. Fist Shino. The stoic bug user looked over to him. What? He asked quietly. I figured out who she likes, look at where she is staring, said the dog boy. Shino let out a small sigh and looked over at Hinata. She had a blush on her face and was currently staring at someone. He followed her gaze, but unfortunately, like Kiba, he was at a different angle than Hinata. That is why his eyes led him to the figure of Haruno Sakura. Shino's eyebrow rose an inch and he gave a look of what people could only guess was confusion. I don't understand, he admitted. Dude, she's a lesbian. What? Holy $, he shouted out. In that instance the whole room became silent and all eyes were on him, wide as dinner plates. Many a mouth hung open in sheer surprise. Sorry, I just realized something that is rather surprising, said Shino. If it weren't for his collar, everyone would see that he was blushing red. Okay. Next time don't let it disturb the meeting, said the Hokage. The old man finished his briefing on the mission and an old drunk man walked in. Wah, he said. These brats are my bodyguards. The groups of two teams were walking the path away from Konoha with their charge. Naruto was currently walking beside Shino and Kiba, who had just told him what they had discovered. Naruto gave a small smile. One cannot control the will of the heart, he said. What? That's it. We got to do something, shouted out Kiba. What? Why? I mean, if she likes another girl then we should be supportive, said Naruto. It's not that idiot, he shouted. I mean, the problem is Sakura. She is a diehard Sasuke fangirl and poor Hinata will get her heart crushed by her. Kiba had tears running down his face as he said this. However, the sad affect was ruined by the fact he had the most perverted blush on his face and was slightly drooling. The prospect of hooking those two up is what excites you, yes, said Shino. Ah, I see, that's why he's so dedicated. Kiba-san is a pervert, stated Naruto. Shut up, I'm only thinking of their well-being, and yes, if I can get something out of this it would be nice, said Kiba. Count me out, said Naruto walking away. I will not help as well, said Shino going with Naruto. Fine, I'll do it myself, you'll help me right boy, said Kiba to his canine friend. All he got was a bark in response. Kurenai was currently in step beside Kakashi. She was staring at the back of Uzumaki Naruto as he walked beside her student Shino. Kakashi, I have to know, she started. If given the choice, would you let him die? Yes, responded Kakashi. Then I have no respect for you, said Kurenai as she walked ahead of him. Kakashi's face remained passive as he shrugged off her comment. To him it was an unimportant statement. They arrived in the country the next day, but they were still a couple of hours away from where Tazuna lived. They walked the path down the forest on guard, each of them noticing something wasn't right. A mist set in over the travelers, taking away their ability of sight. Everyone on guard, ordered Kakashi. Well, 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 copy Nin Kakashi, this is an honor, said a slightly demonic-sounding voice from the mist. Suddenly the sight of several shinobi with their hiates slashed through appeared before them. On a tree branch another appeared carrying with him a large sword. Zabuza, demon of the mist, said Kakashi. My, you've heard of me, what an honor, he stated. Naruto drew the main blade from his back as he and the others surrounded Tazuna. Each of them took on a different defense. Kiba had his nails brandished like claws, Shino had his bugs being scattered through the air, Hinata was in her family's stance waiting. Sakura and Sasuke both had kunai in hand ready for the attack. Ha 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 ha, how amusing, said Zabuza. The demon tilted his head in the group's direction and several of the missing nin attacked. Kakashi was about to intercept them when Zabuza blurred into his vision. Your fight is with me, Kakashi. Kurenai, being much slower than Kakashi, made it to the group just as they began to scatter. She immediately grabbed hold of the old bridge builder and retreated to a safe distance with him in hand. The Genjutsu studied the situation and took the best course of action. She used one of her more powerful illusions to encase herself in Tazuna. Being the type of Genjutsu it was, she was forced to stand there holding the seal to hide them. She wasn't worried, she was positive that her team and Team 7 could take on the missing nin. Naruto backpedaled towards the lake while the three nin followed him. He swiftly dodged the blows they threw his way and began walking on water. One of the nin threw a kick near his abdomen. Naruto quickly launched himself backwards several hundred feet towards the middle of the lake. The nin stared at him for a second, then continued towards his form at top speed. He looked at them through shaded eyes as they drew near. He gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and held it in a ready position behind him. The enemy nin paid no mind to his sword stance, focusing solely on attacking him. They were 20 feet away. Naruto tilted his blade only slightly. 10 feet away, a small tint of blue began to appear on the blade. 5 feet away, Naruto leaned forward a couple of inches and slashed his blade horizontally in the air. There was no surge of chakra, no huge explosion, no blinding light, nothing. Still 5 feet away, the forms of the enemy nin lied on the surface of the water. The crystal blue slowly began to turn red underneath them. He righted himself up and closed his eyes. In the back of his mind he heard the faint whisper of, glorious. He did what he always did and ignored it. This had been his first. He felt no pity for the men, or even ashamed at doing it. It was his job, but that didn't mean he had to enjoy it. He turned to the battles of his comrades to see if he could help. Sakura dodged as best she could, but the blows seemed to only get faster. She was wearing out and she could tell her opponent was just toying with her. He kicked her in the stomach, sending her skidding back on the balls of her feet. He charged again and thrust a claw-covered hand at her face. She managed to dodge but fell on her back. Her opponent took this opportunity to attack again as he sent his claw straight down at her. She rolled as fast as she could to the side and got away. The claw sunk into the ground. The earth itself seemed to crack from the force. She was scared, very scared. She didn't want to die yet. She didn't want any of this. The nin straightened his posture and leapt at her again. This time she couldn't move. She closed her eyes out of reflex and felt hot warm liquid stain her face. She was smart. She knew the blood wasn't her own. She didn't need to open her eyes to tell herself that. What kept her in her own little world was the thought of what she would see when she opened her eyes. She didn't want to. Oh God, how she didn't want to. But the fact remained that she had to. And with her being a bookworm, she had to go with the facts. She slowly opened her eyes and let them adjust to the light. She had been closing them so hard that it was hard for her to see. She saw the bloodied heap of the enemy nin on the ground. The life-giving liquid stained the dirt and seemed to flow towards her. She felt her body begin to shake and a sick feeling well up in her stomach. "I'm not ready for this," was all she could say to assure herself. She held herself as her eyes traveled to her blonde teammate who held a bloody sword in his hand. The red substance slid off his blade into the puddle that was its source. With every ripple caused by every drop, her heart hammered in her chest. She looked at her teammate as he slowly turned towards her. She felt the fear that had been built into her ever since her mother said her words of caution. The sight of him with a bloody blade was far scarier than anything she could have felt from the now dead Nin. He flicked his wrist, causing the remaining blood to shoot off his sword. She was trembling so hard it was as if the earth was moving. He took a step towards her and she moved her hand back, attempting to crawl away. She couldn't take her eyes off the dark shades that covered his glowing orbs. Why am I so afraid of him?" she questioned. "He saved me. He doesn't want to harm me, so why?" She began to pant heavily as if gasping for air. His tall form made its way directly in front of her. He shoved his sword into the ground beside him. Sakura flinched as it entered the earth. Her body remained shaking, tears were unconsciously forming in her beautiful green eyes. And then time froze for her as arms clad in black were wrapped around her. Her body remained fixated in a statue-like position as her head rested on his shoulder. Her mouth was open only slightly and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Sakura," said a warm, gentle voice. "I'm sorry, you aren't ready for this." He pulled back only slightly and stared at her. His hypnotic glowing eyes were now visible to her. She stopped shaking, she stopped panting, and she stopped crying. She just stared out, mesmerized by those glowing jewels he called eyes. And it was the sight of them that brought back the memory of what she felt before she became afraid of him. It was the same feeling of happiness she felt when he saved her from the bullies. He placed his shades back on and she felt herself shift as if she had moved. "Kurenai-sensei," said Naruto. Sakura looked around, wondering when they got to the Genjutsu Junin and their charge. The Junin's red eyes widened at the sight of him. "Please, watch her, she's not ready for something like this," he said as he walked out of her illusion. Naruto looked straight out at the lake. Kakashi remained unmoving in a glowing water prison. The demon chuckled wildly with one hand on the prison. The copy Nin only moved his head to look at his captor. He looked at the genin, all still engaged in their own battles. He didn't see Kurenai, so he assumed she was covering herself and their charge in a powerful genjutsu. His Sharingan eye then rested on the form of the only person he could claim to hate. Naruto stood at the edge of the lake staring out at them. He held his main blade in his right hand as he slowly walked out on the water. The Junin's eyes widened at his show of the water walking technique. Zabuza only chuckled, as the boy grew closer. He formed a single seal and a water clone rose to the surface of the lake holding the menacing sword of the demon. The clone walked forward to the blonde, showing every bit of arrogance that belonged to its creator. It slammed its sword in a downward arc straight on Naruto. Naruto brought his sword up at shocking speed. The main blade split open down the center and blocked the edge of the opposing sword with its tip. The clone appeared to be struggling to move its blade down, while Naruto remained unmoving. He pushed the sword up, causing the clone to go off balance, and in the moment it burst back into its element. Zabuza's eyes were wide. He had just barely caught a glimpse of the boy's slash that had destroyed his clone. He placed himself in the ready position, all while keeping Kakashi at bay in his self-made prison. "So one of the babies knows how to play the game," he said with every hint of enter he could muster. Naruto's face remained stony as he stared at his opponent. Zabuza stared into the shaded sunglasses, trying to get a feel for what the boy was thinking. But it was hopeless. The boy betrayed nothing. Naruto held his sword at his side and began to spin it around in his hand. A blue flame-like chakra seemed to envelop it as he continued to rotate the large sword in his hand. The chakra seemed to take on a lighter shade as it shifted towards a wider scale of chakra. Zabuza stared at the attack. Years of experience told him what to expect. He knew by the amount of chakra being gathered that the technique was a long-range one. He reinforced the prison with his chakra and got ready to move. However, he was shocked to see the boy blur right in front of him. His glowing blade held behind him as he brought it down in a swift arc aimed directly at the demon's sword. Zabuza put his full guard into the blade as he blocked it, but it was of little use. The tremendous amount of chakra that the boy had gathered shattered his sword. Zabuza used his speed to jump away as the blade continued downward to where his right arm would have been. The water of the lake parted as if divided in two as the chakra was released. Zabuza was in a state of shock as he stared at the damage done by the attack. He observed that the bottom of the lake split open and the forest on the other side of the lake was shredded through. He was only further surprised when the copy nin appeared in front of him. It wasn't hard for the missing nin to weigh his odds at this point. He kicked off the lake and sent himself rocketing back. He gave a whistle, which was the order to retreat. His partners looked up from their own battles. Very few of them remained. They all left with their master before anyone could say anything. Kakashi let out a sigh of relief as they left. He turned to see the prone form of Naruto lying on his back unconscious from chakra exhaustion. He stared back at the parted lake, seeing that it had yet to take back its original form. Kakashi threw a look of disgust at his unconscious student. I guess the Kyuubi would have plenty of chakra to spare to make that attack. He thought to himself with another look of disgust. The genius Junin walked past his form, leaving him there in the water. Luckily for Naruto, Kurenai came and picked him up before they left for their charges home. Naruto sat with his legs crossed in the middle of a dank sewer-like room in front of a cage. On the other side sat a red-headed girl, who looked around 12. She lied there sprawled out on a blood-red couch. Despite her appearance of age, she was fully developed. You are a fool, she said bluntly. My power will allow you to awake in a matter of seconds, but if you continue to keep me cut off, it could take days for you to heal on your own. The Kyuubi was taking great pleasure in him being there. The dark smirk on her beautiful face only showed how truly ugly she was on the inside in Naruto's opinion. Despite that he could see her face, his gaze was actually elsewhere. He was looking at the inside of her cage with glazed eyes as if in deep thought. The Kyuubi gave out a small huff in annoyance at the fact that he wasn't listening to her. Oh, how she longed to make him angry, to show his rage to her, to know that she was causing him to suffer. Yes, she had a sick sense of what she found enjoyable. The only thing she actually did find nice was when he hated those nin. She hadn't seen blood in a long time, not since her vessel had wandered through the bodies of the Uchiha district in the massacre. Even then, this was better because he was the one that caused the blood. You humans are such filthy creatures, she said. The only thing that I enjoy of your kind is that you seem to be good at taking each other's lives in glorious displays of blood. She looked at his still form to see if she could get a reaction, but it appeared he wasn't paying attention to her. This annoyed her. Naruto kept his gaze away from her, looking in her cage, completely ignoring her. Who are you? He said, not taking his gaze away from wherever it was he was looking. With those words, the Kyuubi snapped. Her chakra surged on the other side of the cage, as she took on her true form, her demon form. She glared at him with piercing red eyes, growled viciously at him. She grinded her large sharp teeth, wanting to tear through him. Naruto didn't even look at her, even though she was right in front of him. His gaze was past her, not making eye contact. You insolent mortal scum, she roared. You ask who I am. I am the one who will take great pain in your suffering, the one whose name is feared throughout, and the greatest of all demon. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. I know that, but that's not what I wanted to know, he said. The Kyuubi just stared at him, and for the first time in her immortal life she was confused. She was about to give a mocking response when the blonde finally looked at her. His glowing blue orbs froze her in place. She had never thought such a trivial thing as a pair of glowing blue eyes could stun a demon of her caliber. His eyes that glowed with such a brilliant radiance held a heartbreaking wave of sadness. She didn't know why, but for some reason she felt something in the pit of her stomach. She wasn't positive of what it was, but perhaps it was something akin to regret. But then she laughed at the idea. However, anything she could be thinking or feeling remained undetectable behind her rage-like exterior. Naruto stopped looking at her and continued to stare in the cage. "Brat, your question makes no sense," was all she said. "Then, I guess there is no point in my being here," he said. The Kyuubi's eyes widened in exploding proportions in sheer surprise as his body blurred out of existence as he woke up. "How is he waking already?" was all she could say. He slowly opened his eyes and was greeted with the sight of a red-eyed woman. He brought his hand to his face and found that his sunglasses were securely in place. "Well, now this is a surprise. You should have been out for a couple of weeks with all the chakra you used," she said. "Kurenai-san, how long was I out?" he asked. "Only a day," was her response. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. A lot has happened in that very short amount of time. Kakashi is currently training your other teammates in the tree climbing exercise. Since you know water walking, it would only be a waste for you though. Was anybody worried? He asked. He didn't know why her answer would mean so much. Maybe it was the confirmation that he had formed at least some sort of bond with these people. However, he never expected what came next. Of course they were. She shouted, surprising him. "Hinata stayed by your bedside all night." Sakura was in tears, saying something about being sorry. Kiba and Shino visited almost every hour, and Sasuke would have come if Kakashi didn't take him for private instruction. Naruto looked at her thoughtfully for a moment. Kakashi was worried too, lied Kurenai. She didn't know why she had said it, but she didn't want Naruto to know Kakashi hated him. "Kurenai-san, it's okay, I know how he feels," said Naruto quietly. Kurenai looked shocked for a moment, then gave a small nod. "My team is currently guarding Tazuna right now. Zabuza won't be back for a while since you broke his sword," she said. "We estimate it will probably take him around a week or so to fix it." "Oh, I see. Anything else interesting happen?" "Well, Kiba snuck some adult pictures of some kunichi into Sakura's backpack," said Kurenai. "I don't know why he did it, but Sakura thought Kakashi did it and called him a pervert." Naruto began laughing rather hardly at hearing that. He is trying to hook up Sakura and Hinata because Hinata has a crush on Sakura," said Naruto, doing all he could to hold in the remaining chuckles. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. "What on earth would give him an idea like that?" she asked. "He said he saw her blushing like a mad woman while looking at Sakura at a mission briefing," said Naruto. Kurenai brought her hand up to her face and began shaking her head in minor annoyance. "That idiot," was all she thought. Kurenai had seen the blush too. However, unlike both of her young male charges, she had the correct standpoint and thus saw her staring at Naruto. Add that to the fact that she could tell that Hinata had a crush on him, and it proved that Kiba was sorely mistaken with his assessment of the situation. Sakura was becoming extremely paranoid with Kiba now. First, she had found rather inappropriate pictures in her backpack that she had first thought Kakashi put there. However, on closer inspection she found white dog hair among them. Next had been when he pushed Hinata on top of her and ran away saying it was an accident. After that, it had been when he told her that they were all going out for a picnic, and when she showed up it was only she and Hinata. That one wouldn't have been so bad if it wasn't for the fact that the picnic basket was filled with things not meant for children, instead of food. Then there were various other things where he had forced her to sit with Hinata during the few meals they had had. They had been at Chizuna's house for about 4 days now. Naruto had woken up 2 days ago. And in that short time she came to the conclusion of 2 things. 1. Kiba was a pervert, and 2. He wanted something to happen between her and Hinata. Kurenai walked up to her with Hinata in tow and motioned for her to follow. They came near the river before the Junin would speak. Now I'm sure you've noticed the rather odd behavior of Kiba as of late, she stated. Both the girls nodded. Well, now let me explain a few things. Kiba sat on a tree stump in the woods trying to think of new ways to get Sakura with Hinata. He was brought out of his planning as said girls walked out of the foliage in front of him. His heart was sent racing at what he saw. Sakura was standing directly behind Hinata with arms folded around the Hyuga girl. One arm went over her shoulder and rested on Hinata's chest, giving the affect that she was almost holding the other girls. Her other arm was wrapped around her stomach and her chin was on Hinata's shoulder with their cheeks touching each other in an all too comfortable way. Kiba was blushing insanely and he was doing all he could to keep the blood from coming out of his nose. Kiba-kun, said Hinata sweetly, letting herself go deeper in Sakura's embrace. We just wanted to thank you. Yes, said Sakura looking at Hinata with a hint of lust in her eyes. We know that it was because of you that we were able to experiment. She said the last word in a husky voice. Kiba was drooling, thanking whatever god there was out there. The blush went through his entire face, which put most tomatoes to shame. Yes, it really is because of him, isn't it, honey? Said Hinata looking at Sakura. That's right, sweetie, if it wasn't for him I never would have learned. Their faces began to draw closer together. Kiba's mouth dropped wide open, and before he knew it he was sent flying back unconscious as a massive nosebleed marked his trail. He awoke several hours later tied to a tree. The word pervert was on his head in ink. A note was hanging on a string in front of him and he read, Dearest Kiba, being a pervert is very unhealthy, and I assure you that there is in fact nothing going on between Sakura and me. That's right, dog boy, so don't try any of your little schemes because if you do we'll neuter you. And you didn't? Asked Naruto, curious. I figured you would like an explanation, so I stayed, said Shino. Naruto gave a small smile at that. He walked over to a couch and sat down. The soft cushions felt nice against his body. So, is Kakashi still training Sasuke? Said Naruto. To my knowledge, yes, responded Shino. They haven't returned since they left yesterday. Kurenai-sensei says they are fine though. I don't doubt it. Kakashi is a strong shinobi and Sasuke is well on his way, stated Naruto with another smile. Shino looked at him through his own set of sunglasses. His stare was intense and Naruto had started to think he had upset the boy. You are a very strange one, said Shino. What do you mean? There was another silence between the two of them, as Shino seemed to be arranging his words carefully. Your sensei hates you, he said flatly. I know, was all Naruto said. Shino raised an eyebrow. Why? Because, to him I'm just a reminder, said Naruto. Shino moved in his seat uncomfortably. He could see that the topic of conversation should stop. I'm sorry. Don't be, said Naruto with a wide grin. I'm used to it, and you've done nothing wrong. Shino nodded. Except call me strange. Shino's sweat dropped. Well, my bugs tell me your chakra is different. Naruto got up and stretched. Different? Different as in bad or evil? Asked Naruto with a small frown. Reading manga series. Quite the opposite actually. They say it is calming. Well, I'm glad something likes me. Naruto walked over to Shino and held out his hand. It was nice getting to chat with you, Shino. I hope we can work together sometime. Shino raised another eyebrow at the hand, but shook it a second later. Likewise. And with that, Naruto left the house. The sun was rather bright as he walked out to the pier in front of the house. He stretched to get the remaining kinks out of his muscles. Naruto made his way up the dock and looked down at the cool reflective water below. The water was pure and clear, untainted by the troubles that seemed to possess the rest of the land. Soft footsteps fell upon Naruto's ears. Someone was sneaking up to him on the deck. He turned calmly and looked to see what it was. A small boy stood in front of him, his eyes curious and confused. "You're pretty good," said the boy. Naruto raised an eyebrow as the child walked closer. "May I ask who you are?" The boy stopped and was silent for a little while before he spoke. "I'm Inari. It's nice to meet you, Inari," replied Naruto with a smile. "You wouldn't happen to be related to Tazuna, would you?" Inari nodded. "Yeah, he's my grandpa." Inari shuffled nervously on his feet as he looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. Naruto looked very confused at this. "For what?" "Reading manga series. When your team brought you back, I sort of told them it was useless and that you were gonna die anyway. Then I said a few other, rather cruel things." Naruto chuckled at this. "It sounds like you were scared." Inari looked surprised. "You know, you are a lot like her." "Who?" asked Naruto, a little more curious. "That girl with the pale eyes. When I said those things, she laughed and hugged me, said I didn't need to be scared," said Inari, wiping a couple of small tears from his eyes. "She is real nice." "Yes, I suppose she is." A small snigger came on Inari's face. "She likes you." Naruto seemed to freak at this. "Well, I would hope so. I thought we were becoming friends." No, I mean she lo. Anair, I believe your mother is looking for you," said Shino, walking up to the two of them. Inari nodded and left the two alone. Shino looked back over to Naruto. "He's right though, don't hurt her." "Hurting people isn't something I do," said Naruto. Shino sighed and shook his head. The two of them walked back to the house. As they entered, Naruto immediately felt an icy glare upon him. He turned to see Kakashi enter the room. Behind him was Sasuke, looking rather worn out. He gave Naruto a small smile, then flopped on one of the couches. He felt another set of eyes on him and turned to see Kurenai giving him a soft look. Her team was currently discussing strategies on their next move should Zabuza attack. Naruto soon began to feel uncomfortable in the room. He could sense Kakashi's tension growing ever more violent. He reached a decision that he should leave. He turned to those in the room and gave a small bow. "I'm going to go train for a while," he said. "I don't know when I will be back, so do not worry if I'm not here in the morning." He left the room, and as soon as he did so, he felt Kakashi's anger drop. Those in the room sensed Kakashi relax as Naruto left. Team 8 silently grew angry with the man, while Team 7 tried to ignore their sensei's behavior. They looked around for Kurenai but found she was nowhere in sight. Naruto walked out to the forest. He was almost out of range of the house when he felt something wrap around him. It was not threatening in the least, it was warm and caring. Naruto's eyes widened for a bit, as he stood frozen. "You've done nothing wrong," he heard Kurenai say. Naruto relaxed even more at the sound of her soothing voice. "I know." At that, she let go of him. He took a couple steps away before turning towards her. "Kurenai-sensei, arigato." He walked away from her and she couldn't help but smile. One tear fell down her cheek. Flashback. Kurenai walked into the Hokage office, more than a little weary. She had just come from a training exercise with her team. As the secretary let her in, she saw the old man sitting in his chair signing away at some paperwork. "You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama?" asked Kurenai. The old man looked up at her and smiled. He rose from his desk, bringing his sense of authority with him. Kurenai-san, it is good that you could come, said the old man with another smile. How goes your team? Taking psychology courses. They are doing fine. Hinata is truly amazing. Shino and Kiba are progressing at a rate that I find astonishing myself, said Kurenai with a little pride in her voice. The old man's smile grew wider at this. I see. Do you feel they are ready for a joint mission? Why, yes I do, said Kurenai, thinking about it. May I ask what the mission is? A bridge builder needs protection. I had originally planned on only assigning Team 7 for this, but I feel your team would help, said the man with a frown. There was an awkward silence between the two, and Kurenai felt an unasked question in the old man. Are you aware of who Team 7 is comprised of? He finally said. Why yes actually, said Kurenai, sensing that this conversation had more meaning to it as it went on. Led by Hitaki Kakashi, Genin include Rookie of the Year Uchiha Sasuke, the highest academic Haruno Sakura, and the supposed dead last, Uzumaki Naruto. Ah yes, Naruto, what do you think of him? Said the old man, turning to face the window. He stared out it overlooking the village, but she felt his attention was completely on her. Kurenai became confused, not knowing if this was some sort of test. She remained silent, trying to place her words properly for the Hokage. The Hokage only heard her silence and sighed. She saw his shoulders sag and his head look down. All the energy, spirit, power, authority seemed to be drained from him. He lost his edge, and Kurani noticed by his demeanor that he seemed rather tired. Do you hate him? He asked, his voice cracking as he did so. Kurenai took a step back at the emotion held in the voice. It was so tired, and old, the Hokage finally seemed his age. She saw the man begin to shake from some unknown reason. Do you despise him like so many others? He turned and looked up at her. Fresh tears were staining his face as he took a step towards his desk. He sat down and took off his hat. Tears soon began to fall to the desk as buried his hands in his face. Do you wish for his death? He asked another question, and Kurenai found herself unable to give an answer. She saw his body shaking, and she found herself beginning to panic. The Hokage had always been a pillar of strength for her, and the village. He had never once wavered in his duties, or in how he held himself. The sight before her was both frightening and heartbreaking. I've watched him grow, stuttered the Hokage, into a fine young man, but his pain, his emptiness, they crush me. The Hokage seemed to be choking on his words, and Kurenai found her face growing wet, as she watched the man who seemed so powerful begin to break down. He smiles, he laughs, and he thinks nothing of his own happiness. The Hokage had to pause as he tried to regain control over himself. He didn't do anything wrong, not one thing. She watched the Hokage go into his desk drawer and pull out a photograph. On it she saw a 4-year-old, possibly younger Naruto, sitting next to the Hokage with a smile on his face. He held some stuffed animal, and looked so happy. However, his body was slightly malnourished, and his clothes looked like rags. She remembered seeing him once during that age. It was during the time he lived in the orphanage. I don't hate him, Hokage-sama, said Kurenai, finally finding her voice. The old man looked up at her, and through a tear-stained face managed to smile. Please, I beg you. The Hokage rose again from his seat and walked before Kurenai. He got on both his knees and bowed. Protect him, help him, he has so very few people in his life. I ask you this not as your Hokage, but as a favor to a desperate old man. More tears fell to the floor, and Kurenai found her heart breaking. How long had her Hokage been suffering, keeping his pain for the boy hidden? How long has he felt the guilt, the hardships of leading a village that hated a boy he cared so much about. The man was on the breaking point, making his last desperate attempts to set things right. I promise you, I will watch and protect Uzumaki Naruto. Reading manga series. The man managed another weak smile, as more tears flooded through his tired eyes. Thank you, thank you. End of flashback. Kurenai watched the boys retreating back. Her one tear had grown into many. You've touched the select few that know you. I will protect you, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto felt the emotions going through Kurenai as he walked away. He soon found a tear of his own come down his cheek. He wiped it away and kept walking forward. He needed to clear his head, and he knew just how. It was around mid-noon when he arrived at a clearing in the forest. The buzz of nature around him was calming. He couldn't do any sword training. He had left his blade at the house. No, he had something else in mind. He removed his dark upper garments and placed them on the ground. He was now bare from the waist up. Naruto stretched before putting himself in a crouched stance. He put his forearms to his stomach and clutched his elbows. As he did so, he sent chakra to his back. A small stinging sensation erupted from Naruto's back, as his wings sprawled out. The snow-white feathers scattered around the area, in a beautiful display. Naruto removed his sunglasses and put them with his upper clothes. The blonde would-be angel stared up at the sky with a smile. With a strong flap he was airborne, his body rocketing towards the clouds. He ascended to a higher altitude to the point where only the white fluff of the heavens lay underneath him. It was quiet and calm in the sky, and Naruto took a deep breath. True to what his bloodline entailed, Naruto's body felt no drawbacks to being at such a high altitude. He didn't have to adjust to the air pressure, and even with the thinner air, he had no problems breathing. He flapped his wings again, allowing his feathers to glow in the sun. He soon began to fly forward, gaining speed. He closed his glowing eyes, so he could only feel the sky. His body was soon moving as a blur. A white jet stream was behind him as he broke the sound barrier. His special chakra spread around him, allowing him to move even faster. His wings glowed as his chakra was pushed into them. They allowed him to glide as his chakra propelled him forward. This is how he was able to attain such high speeds without flapping like a madman. It was quite easy since he was only going in one direction. He didn't know how long he was in the sky, but he knew he was far out of wave country. He wasn't worried. One thing he had learned while flying was how to navigate. He went below the clouds and saw only sand. He knew he was now in wind country. Quite the feat considering how many days if not weeks it would have taken to get there by foot. He felt the sun beat down on him, but his body was tough and seemed to thrive off the heat it gave. He felt neither tired nor stressed, however he was rather thirsty. To his immense luck he spotted an oasis below him. He folded his wings up and let his body fall towards it. As he was about to hit the ground he gave another powerful flap, causing his descent to halt, and he landed smoothly. He spread his wings out as far as they could go as if stretching them. He then walked over to the small spring for his drink. He could tell by looking at it that the water was good. Crystal clear, and there was even a mini waterfall falling from some rocks. It was small, but it kept the water flowing, so that it would not become contaminated as standing water. He brought his face close to the water and dipped his hand in. It was ice cold. He scooped up some of the water and began to drink. The cool liquid felt good on his hot throat. He didn't even realize how thirsty he was until he started drinking. He suddenly became aware of another presence. It was a faint chakra signature. The person wasn't hiding. No, it was the sort of signature of someone just going about his or her business. And as he thought this, a beautiful girl popped up from under the water. Supporting social causes. Naruto nearly got a nosebleed as he quickly looked away. The girl she hadn't noticed him and was now washing under the waterfall. She had sandy blonde hair and quite a good figure. Naruto realized that his wings were still out, so he should probably go. Not to mention it would be quite rude to interrupt someone as they were bathing. His thirst had been satisfied, so he left. As he was some 10 feet in the air, he looked back. He saw her form from the behind and a deep blush came to his cheeks. She was very beautiful. He felt kind of bad as well as perverted at seeing what he had, but he figured it wouldn't happen again and it was an accident, and well, he was glad he did. The girl with the sandy blonde hair continued to wash herself. "Ah, so nice," she said. She did the backstroke over to the sandbank and rested on it with a sigh. She turned her head to the side where something had caught her eye. The sun was reflecting off something, allowing it to glow on the ground. Even though she didn't know what it was, she found the glow very beautiful. She swam over to it, getting a little excited. Maybe it's a diamond, she thought. Ah, girls and their diamonds. As she drew closer, the object seemed even more beautiful. She stretched out her hand and picked it up. It was soft and warm, and rather large. It was a glorious feather that the girl had never seen before. It was snow white but seemed to have a silvery glow in the sunlight. She seemed mesmerized by it, and curious. What kind of bird left this? She wondered. The girl with the sandy blonde hair looked in the sky, just in time to see a dot with the same heavenly glow rise above the clouds. "Wow," was all she said. "Tamari, are you finished?" The girl known as Tamari turned around to see a boy who not too long ago scared her to death, her brother Gaara. "Yeah, I'm just about done," she said. "I found this really unique feather." Gaara walked out from behind the rocks in front of her and looked. She looked very happy and even a bit proud she had found something as simple as a feather. However, it was a rather pretty feather. A small smile, that was considered quite large for the boy, came to his lips. "And what are you smiling about?" asked Tamari teasingly. "Nothing." True to what he had learned in Konoha, Gaara had found something to redeem for, something to protect and make happy, his sister. Naruto looked in the sky. The moon was now out. He had been having such a good time that he ended up losing track of it. Despite his earlier vigor, he was now very exhausted. He was nearly out of chakra and had to get back. His form was just above the trees now, having reached wave not that long ago. He was no just searching for the clearing he had left his stuff in. While he technically didn't need his shirt, people lost those all the time during training. He did need his glasses. Glowing eyes are quite hard to explain if people aren't already aware of it. He descended to the ground with a soft thud. His eyelids were very heavy. His steps were clumsy and uncoordinated. Yes, he truly was tired, due to chakra depletion. Not to mention sleep was ready to overtake him. He came to the familiar clearing, where his clothes lay. He didn't even have the energy to make it to them. He plopped against a tree and before he knew it, was out like a light. Naruto now sat before the cage of the mighty Kyuubi. Even in the dream-like world he seemed rather tired. The fox sat in her human form on a couch she had sprung up in her mind. She laid on it in a way that would have any man say seductive, but Naruto didn't seem to notice. "Tisk tisk tisk. Bad Naruto peeking at girls while they bathe," said Kyuubi with a smirk. She conjured up a mirror and in it was the sight of the girl bathing. It was his memory. "I never would have thought you, the great hero who so boldly locks me up, would be a pervert." Naruto was only half listening. He was still very tired. He leaned against the bars and gave a kind smile. Kyuubi seemed rather taken aback by it though. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't have looked," said Naruto, not really thinking. Kyuubi's brow furrowed. The boy took away all the fun in trying to torture him. Tish, whatever, said the Kyuubi. You really did it this time though, using all your chakra for something as meager as flying. If you have access to my memories, then you'll see that it isn't so meager. Said Naruto with another small smile. All he really wanted to do was get some sleep. The Kyuubi saw this and smirked. She slowly began to leak chakra towards him. As it was about to reach him, it exploded off the bars as the bright white chakra protected his form. Naruto sighed. You just don't learn, I'll never use your chakra. Kyuubi pouted in frustration at being foiled. Truth was she was just going to recharge his chakra, and show him how useful her chakra could be. Then again, once he accepted it, she was just going to keep pushing it on him until the seal broke. Yeah, he was smarter than he looked. She lied back on the couch with a sigh. His snores were soon heard by her. She brought the mirror in front of her, and started to watch the memory of him flying. Haku walked through the woods collecting herbs. She needed to find a couple more to make her remedy for the men. And though Zabuza wasn't hurt himself, it would pay to have something like that with her for him at any time. She was Zabuza's tool, at least that's what she told herself. Whenever someone asked her gender, she would say boy, just to cause less problems and she could focus more on protecting him. She would die for him in an instant, but she wanted it to end. She didn't like them always being in danger and hunted, she wanted him to be safe. She would pray at night for some way to solve her problems. Truth was she needed a guardian angel. And then she stopped frozen. The irony of the world was quite unique. In front of her was a blonde-haired boy with white wings on his back. He was currently asleep against a tree. His body was fit and strong, and Haku knew he was a fighter of some sort. He looked rather peaceful as he lay there, and a small blush came to the girl's face, but she quickly sent it down. Haku walked over to him curiously, being careful not to wake him up. She sat beside him silently and slowly stretched out her hand. It was daring, but she touched his wings, they were real. Haku found herself confused and even more curious. She suddenly had a million questions, like was he real, what was heaven like, why was he there? She then began to shake him awake. Excuse me, one Tenshi-san, said Haku. The boy began to stir as his eyes fluttered open. Haku gasped at his beautiful eyes, they glowed with a holy and intense power, and truth was Haku found herself growing very excited. Said Naruto as he woke up. He looked forward to see a girl in front of him, she had dark brown hair and chocolate brown eyes. Tenshi-san, are you alright? She asked. Tenshi-san, thought Naruto. As he grew more aware of his surroundings, he soon found he still had his wings out. He mentally screamed at this. Tenshi-san, are you really an angel? Asked Haku. It was childish, and totally different from her normal character, but she had to know. The slightest chance of making Zabuza's life better was worth her childish fantasies. If he was really some sort of guardian angel for her, then she sure as hell wasn't going to let this chance slip away. Naruto stopped. He looked at the girl for a moment and saw the hope in her eyes and so much more. He could tell right away what she was. She was someone who had been through hell, whose life was full of tragedy and suffering. He then thought of his answer. Lying might be cruel, but at the same time it may not be. Really, it was his own fault for being so weak and passing out before he could fix himself up. It was his fault that he had gotten her hopes up, because really when you see someone with wings, what else comes to mind? He looked at her and gave a small warm smile, then nodded. It was subtle, but a flicker of joy went in the girl's eyes. Then, can I please ask you something? She said, holding her hands together. A favor? Sure. He said in an all too normal fashion. The girl didn't seem to mind though. You see, there is someone very precious to me. He's always in trouble and I do all I can to protect him. she started. But you see, I want it to stop. I want him to be safe. Naruto nodded in understanding. Please, can you watch over him? Naruto frowned for a minute. He wasn't one to lie. I'm sorry, I can't guarantee I can, said Naruto. The girl looked disheartened at this. I see. His voice was silent and cold, almost dead. She got up and began to walk away. Naruto soon felt terrible about himself. Haku walked into her master's fortress. Her face was stony and cold. She was a tool, nothing more. She would die to save her master. She would protect him using her own strength. Zabuza was sharpening his sword when Haku walked in. It had been repaired the day before, now he was just getting it ready. Haku, are you ready? He asked. The girl nodded. While you weren't there in the last battle, that was my mistake, you still managed to find the weakness of the Sharingan based on what I told you. Truly you are proving yourself more worthy. Hi, said Haku. We fight tomorrow. Hi. Naruto walked back to the house. It was around noon. He was once again fully clothed and his wings were put away. He thought about the girl he had just met, how sad she seemed. He would have to do something. He entered the house without a word. Shino, Kiba, Inari, and a woman he had never seen before were the only ones home. The woman was presumably Inari's mother. Naruto walked up the stairs and got his swords. He would do even more intense training now. He would train into the dead of night before he passed out again. The next day, the bridge was silent, covered in the thick mist. All the shinobi guards present knew what it meant. They heard a laugh erupt in their ears, from every direction. Kakashi lifted his Hayate, revealing his Sharingan eye. Team 7 brandished kunai and prepared, while Kurenai covered the bridge builder and herself in another powerful genjutsu. Hinata activated her Byakugan, Shino scattered bugs in the area, and Kiba popped a soldier pill in Akumaru's mouth. Well, it seems your brat with the swords isn't here. Too bad, I was looking for a rematch, said Zabuza. Kakashi visibly seethed at this. Oh dear, does the boy actually make you angry, Kakashi? Kakashi calmed himself so he could think straight. Though he hated the Kyuubi with a passion, he was smart enough to know that by bringing those feelings in this battle would endanger the mission. Fine then. Zabuza appeared in front of Kakashi, with his sword raised. Let's start. He swung the blade down and Kakashi barely dodged. He began to form seals and the battle had begun. Reading manga series. Sasuke ran through the mist. He had seen another shinobi trying to hide. He soon came upon a masked enemy whose gender he could not identify. But that did not seem to matter as the person's skill spoke for them. In speed so blinding Sasuke could barely register he was kicked. Gaining his bearings he flipped in mid-air and landed on his feet. Adjusting to his opponent, he brought his own speed out. They dueled in perfect synchronization as they traded blows, in fluid motions. Haku began forming one-handed seals and stomped on the ground. Water-like needles formed and shot at Sasuke from all directions. He was surprised but not defeated. In a quick succession of seals he inhaled some air. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. And with that Sasuke spat out a large spew of flames. He spun around as he blew, destroying all the needles. While this was happening, Haku wasted no time as she prepared the next set of seals. It had happened so fast that by the time Sasuke had finished rotating and was out of fire, ice mirrors surrounded him. He knew their presence couldn't be good. Naruto woke up on the cold ground. He had no clue what time it was, just that he had been training all this time. As he rose from the ground, his body was fresh and energized. He felt rather good at the moment. He hefted his large sword with little trouble, and then flexed. His shoulders popped and he gave a sigh in pleasure. He took one step towards the house, and knew immediately that something was wrong. The forest was quiet, and the wind was still. There was an evil linger in the air, and Naruto gripped the hilt of his serrated blade. He looked around calmly, deciding on whether he should move. There was a rumbling in the earth and the ground began to shake. Naruto looked from the ground to the trees as he saw a large spinning cyclone ball of water heading towards him. His reaction was instant. He channeled his chakra into his serrated blade and sliced the air. In a blaze of glory, the chakra was released in a jagged, almost lightning-like bolt of chakra. Its properties matched those of the serrated blade it was released from. The two attacks collided and held in a stalemate for a short while, before the water cyclone overpowered the chakra attack. However, the attack had served its purpose. In the time it was held off, Naruto activated his gravity seal and sped off. The ball exploded into the trees and two nin fell to the ground to survey the scene. They both looked exhausted. They had used most of their chakra in a combined attack to make the jutsu work. They looked around before their eyes widened. They jumped in the air just as another chakra slice went through where they were standing. The attack had come from Naruto's main blade on a horizontal angle. Because of this, several trees fell down after being cut perfectly in half. The two nin looked at where Naruto was now standing, and then blinked. He was gone. They were both chunin. They had experience as well as skill. The only problem was that in such a quick amount of time, they had lost almost all their chakra. Combine that with the fact that the boys' speed was at a near unheard of level and they were toast. Their bodies fell to the ground. They were not dead. Naruto had only rendered them unconscious with a few well-placed hits. They wouldn't be able to move for weeks. Naruto knew his team was in trouble but that they could hold on. For the moment he would rush to see if Inari was okay. Sasuke looked around the mirrors frantically as more and more needles embedded themselves in his body. His eyes were slowly starting to see the movements, but it still wasn't good enough. He dodged a few only to have a few more end up in his back. His opponent was like monster. The technique had no weakness that Sasuke could see. "I'm sorry, but I have to end this," said Haku. Several mirrors appeared to have shot needles out instantaneously. Sasuke watched them as they began to slow down. He could see it. The movement was less. All the needles were coming from in front of him. A mistake as it left him with options on how to get out. His dodging was fluid in its own right and every needle missed. He had dodged by moving to the barest minimum to avoid each needle. The end result was that it appeared he hadn't moved at all. Interesting, but next time I won't leave you with a way out. Haku's reflection appeared on all the mirrors as they all readied needles. Sasuke's hair covered his new Sharingan eyes and he smirked. "May I ask what is so entertaining? It's very unfortunate for you that I would unlock my bloodline now." Sasuke looked at all the reflections. "You have heard of the Uchiha, correct?" asked Sasuke. "Yes, I am fully aware of your bloodline's strengths and weaknesses," said Haku. "Then do you know about these?" asked Sasuke as he patted both of his leg bracers. He continued to smirk as he did so. "These weights are made special for the Uchiha." "I'm afraid I don't see your point," said Haku. "These weights absorb and then store the chakra of the user," said Sasuke. "When I release them, all that chakra that has gathered is gonna flood me, released in one instantaneous moment. With that I will be able to travel at speeds that make you look like a child crawling." Haku's eyes widened. "I say you're bluffing. To move at a speed like that would be blinding to the user." Then realization hit Haku. "Yes, you see, don't you?" said Sasuke, pointing to his Sharingan eye. "That's why these weights are special for the Uchiha. With these eyes, I can see all." Reading manga series. Sasuke reached down and touched his bracers. As he did so, there was a clam silence. And in a blink there was loud noise. Sasuke was gone and all the mirrors broke at once. Haku went flying back, almost every bone in her body broken. She had no clue how many times Sasuke had struck her in that moment. Sasuke appeared in a blur back where he had started, his eyes looked faded and he let out a sigh. I can do a lot in just a moment. And then he passed out. Zabuza was frozen in a deadlock when he sensed the surge of chakra come from where Haku was. He looked over at it shocked. What was that? That was Sasuke, said Kakashi with a smile. Haku, be safe. Naruto stood in front of two now passed out samurai. Inari was in front of him giving thanks. Naruto sensed the surge of chakra and was off. Haku opened her eyes and got up, her mask now broken leaving her face exposed. She was still alive. She looked over to the now unconscious Uchiha. She understood what happened. In his moment of god-like speed and power he could do a lot, but afterwards he would pass out. Truly ingenious of the Uchiha clan, if not a little arrogant. She sensed a pulsing of lightning chakra. Zabuza-sama needs me. A mirror formed beside her and she was gone. Zabuza resigned himself to his fate. The dogs had a god grip on his body and Kakashi ran towards him, wielding his death. As he drew closer he noticed a mirror appear, and his eyes widened. He saw Haku throw some needles at the scroll that bound the dogs to him. She then stood in front of him, ready to die. Zabuza acted quickly. The needles had destroyed the scroll in an instant, freeing him. Kakashi was only 2 centimeters away, before the attack struck Haku's heart. Zabuza grabbed Haku by the shoulder and pushed her to the side. Now it was just him and Kakashi. The attack was 5 centimeters away from Zabuza's heart. Haku's world slowed down just as she assumed it had for Zabuza. It was only with this perspective he had been able to move her. Now she was falling to the side, watching her eyes watering up, as she couldn't do anything. She saw Zabuza give what she assumed was a smile. Where's my angel? Thought Haku. Now Zabuza felt himself be pushed back. The blonde-haired boy that had broken his sword had pushed him out of the way. The attack went through the blonde's upper chest, out the back. Naruto coughed and Kakashi looked surprised. Haku stared from the ground in disbelief. Tenshi-san, she said. You asked me to protect someone special, said Naruto. I hope I got it right and it was him, he said with a smile. Naruto, said Kakashi confused. Why? They are the enemy, are you double-crossing us? No, said Naruto. But there is no reason for us to fight now. Naruto looked out into the mist, where a figure approached. And besides Kakashi-sensei, you didn't want to them. A lot of blood fell from Naruto's shoulder and he grew colder. It was far from a fatal wound with his ability but still it hurt. He was low on chakra. He had channeled all he had to get in front of Kakashi's attack. Kakashi removed his hand from Naruto's shoulder and sighed. He turned to see the short shipping merchant Gedo. Zabuza, you worthless. Kurenai had appeared in a swirl, out of one of her genjutsus next to Gedo. She then proceeded to slit his throat. It was done so quick none of the thugs registered what happened. Well, that's done, said Kurenai. The Hokage looked at the two now in his office. Both of them stared at him nervously. The old man gave a small cough. Well, Zabuza, you are currently a missing nin and wanted felon to the Mizukage, and Haku, you are still technically a citizen of another country. While your bloodline was hated and there was even an attempt on your life, your clan was still registered under it, and any prominent clan member cannot change countries without the feudal lord's recognition, said the Hokage. Both of them looked down, not liking where this was going. Their moves were silent. They weren't going to the old man, but they were definitely preparing for a fight to get out. The old man noticed all of this even though he wasn't facing them. That's how it would be normally. He let his words trail off at that and both Haku and Zabuza stopped what they were doing. I beg you pardon, said Zabuza. Naruto came and talked with me not too long ago. Haku, how much do you know about Naruto? Asked the old man. Tenshi-san. Haku froze as the man mentioned her angel. Did he really have a talk with the Hokage? Yes, if that's what you call him, said the Hokage with a small modest smile. I didn't get to know him all that well, but I owe him a lot and I would like to, said Haku, blushing as she thought about Naruto. She definitely wanted to get to know her hero. Ah, I see, said the Hokage with a small knowing smile. Then let it be known that Kakashi succeeded in driving the Chidori through your heart, Haku, and Zabuza, you were so overcome with grief that at the sight of Gaotu, who, let's say, defiled Haku's name, you charged at him with only a kunai in your mouth. You then ran through the man's armying as you went and finally sliced the man's throat. You then died from your wounds. Zabuza's eye twitched. You certainly have some imagination, said Zabuza. The old man only smiled at this. I also wouldn't mind if you sparred with Naruto in a sword duel, said the Hokage. Zabuza nodded. Then you may leave, oh, and Haku. The girl turned to face the old man. Yes. Don't tell anyone what you saw, it would put his life in danger, said the Hokage. Haku's eyes widened, understanding the gravity of the situation, and nodded. Guy stood in front of his students, only Lee looked enthusiastic. While Naruto had tucked Lee out of becoming a carbon copy of Guy, the enthusiasm stayed. However, Lee was already enthusiastic before he met Guy. Today my youthful students will be a day to get to know each other, said Guy. But Guy-sensei, we already learned about each other when we introduced ourselves at the formation of this team, said Tenten. That may be true, but you see, your youthful passion is forever changing, bringing the need to get to know each other every so often. Guy-sensei, shouted Lee, throwing his fist in the air with a shout. The boys' two teammates sighed. Oh, Lee, I almost forgot. I heard Naruto-kun returned from his mission, said Guy enthusiastically. Lee's eyes grew wide and he smiled a happy grin. It was different from his normal grin where his teeth shined and just told you he was enthusiastic. This smile made him actually seem truly happy. Both Tenten and Neji became quiet as they stared at the two eyebrowed men. They had heard of this Naruto in casual conversation. The boy must have been someone really important to both Guy and Lee, the way they acted at the mention of him. Tenten really noticed this the most. Guy would become quiet and just seemed happy at the thought of the boy, and Lee would suddenly become more mature. She often wondered what kind of person the boy was to inspire such change in two men like Guy and Lee. It seemed her question would be answered soon. All became quiet and the team froze where they were. Tenten noticed the small smile that came to Guy's lips as a presence drew near. In an instant, Guy grabbed both Tenten and Neji and lunged back. Both of the genins' eyes were wide as they flew through the air. They saw Lee drop into a defensive stance with a small smirk on his face. Then it happened. A black blur shot from the forest at Lee. A fist slammed into Lee's forearm, as the eyebrowed boy blocked. There was a loud boom that came from the blow, and the group that was watching felt its power. The blur, which now could be identified as a blond boy, seemed frozen in the air. His fist was still locked to Lee's forearm, and the two seemed to size each other up. The blond was clad in black. His pants were black and baggy, and they seemed to conceal a few hidden kunai. He wore a tight black shirt that lied underneath a sort of flowing black hooded coat. The coat itself was more like a robe, loose but durable and black like the rest of his outfit. Silver linings seemed to outline his clothing, and the front of his shirt had a few silver chains and zippers. The boy then grabbed Lee's arm and used it to twist himself in the air. He struck down on Lee with his left foot. Lee only smirked. He reversed the hold the boy had on his arm and gained a tight grip. He then grabbed a hold of the boy's approaching foot, leaving the blonde in a tight hold that locked his movement. Lee then jumped, still holding the boy securely, and brought his legs to the boy's stomach. His blows were intense and quick. Tenten and Neji had lost count at how many times Lee struck the boy in the waist. However, all the attacks had proved to be useless as the blonde turned into a log. Lee turned immediately around and was greeted by a kick. Lee brought his own kick up and blocked the attack. The force created by the two limbs hitting sent a small shock wave through the area. Lee smirked as the attacks met. He jumped in the air and began to do backflips. While in the air, he brought his arms down to his ankles where he unclasped his weights. The training weights went soaring to the ground, pushed by the momentum of Lee's flips. When Lee hit the ground not long after, he disappeared in a blur. Tenten and Neji were unsurprised, having seen Lee's amazing speed before, but were shocked when they saw the blonde disappear in an even faster blur. "Guy-sensei, shouldn't we help?" asked Tenten, watching as the blurs would appear clashing for only a moment before they disappeared faster than her eyes could track. "That won't be necessary," said Guy. At that moment, both figures met and struck each other in the face. They were sent flying back to opposite sides of the field. When they landed, both of them were panting heavily. "You've gotten stronger, Lee," said the blonde, panting heavily. "As have you, Naruto-kun," said Lee, panting equally as fast. "I was surprised when I found you moving without your weights. Were you moving full speed?" Naruto shook his head from the ground. "I don't know by how much, but I know I could get faster," said Naruto, still panting. They both rose from the ground with smirks on their faces. "Well, since it was a draw," they said in unison, "the one that pays for Ichiraku is Guy-sensei." Both of them pointed to the green beast and he just began to laugh. "Your flames of youth deserve this," he shouted, laughing like a maniac. Lee wrapped his arm over Naruto's shoulder and began walking him over to his teammates. "Naruto-kun, allow me to introduce you to my teammates Hyuga, Neji and Tenten." "What's your last name?" asked Lee, confused. Tenten's eyebrow twitched at that. "If you could get your facts straight, Lee, you would remember I don't have a last name," said the girl in an irritated voice. Lee nodded and started writing it down in his little notebook. Everyone's sweat dropped as he did so. "Yes, it's true. You see, Naruto, I call this team my group of youthful independents," shouted out Guy. "Tenten has no known family and lives by herself in the apartment district. Hyuga Neji has his clan, but has no parents, and because he's branch member, he watches after himself and the main family. And of course you know about me, Naruto-kun," shouted Lee. Naruto gave a soft smile and bowed at Lee's two teammates. "It is very nice to meet you," he said. Tenten gave a smile and bowed as well. Neji only nodded in recognition. "Oh yes, Naruto-kun here is an orphan as well," said Guy. "He joined the academy late but has been training with me just as long as Lee has. In all actuality, his training is even more intense than Lee's." Neji and Tenten's eyes grew wider than dinner plates at that. "He not only is great at taijutsu but is an amazing sword master," shouted Lee, joining his sensei in praising his friend. "A sword master?" asked Tenten, her interest piqued even further. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "I wouldn't say master, but I am pretty good," said Naruto. "Really?" said Tenten. "Ah, yes, Tenten here is a weapons specialist. Her youthful knowledge knows no bounds," shouted Guy. Tenten blushed at the declaration. "Naruto-kun, where is your amazing sword? You didn't leave it at home, did you?" asked Lee. "No, it in the forest," said Naruto. "I left it in there when I attacked you." Naruto stalked off towards the Konoha forest and ducked behind a tree. He grabbed a hold of his blade and hefted it over his shoulders. He brought it back to the group. Neji's eyes were wide and Tenten was, ecstatic. Her eyes became large hearts, and her mouth hung open with some drool pouring out. She let out girlish whimsies of joy and started jumped up and down in excitement. Oh my god, I can't believe it. She shouted at the top of her lungs. It's the first Tsurugi. A what? Asked the group in unison. Tenten blinked in shock at their lack of knowledge. How can you not know? Asked Tenten. The sword the first Tsurugi is one of a kind. Its creator went unknown, but there was no doubt to its perfectly crafted design. Combining advanced ingenuity and legendary metal work, the blade was created. It is actually 6 blades in one. That alone gives it amazing properties. The group watched in astonishment, as she seemed to tell the entire blade's history. From previous owners, to battles it had been used in, and even the different type of metal work used for it. She knew more about the blade than Naruto did. There has never been a known swordsman to have mastered the blade. Its large design and complex interchanging of the blades make it difficult to handle, said Tenten, drawing closer to Naruto. Her smile was wide and rather attractive. She drew closer to his face, telling him even more facts. He blushed a little at her closeness. But you're well on your way to mastering it, I can tell when I saw this in your hand's eye. Tenten trailed off her ramble and looked at her audience. They were speechless at her youthful enthusiasm. Their mouths hung wide open and all their eyes were wide. Tenten stopped completely and looked down. A huge blush of embarrassment came to her face. Sorry. It was just really exciting is all, said Tenten quietly, looking away. The group was silent before one of them burst out laughing. They turned to see Naruto near tears from chuckling so hard. I have to tell you, that was surprising. You knew more about the thing than I did, said Naruto. He pointed the blade in front of him towards the sky. Now onward to Ichiraku's, said Naruto kindly with a small smile. It would be great if your whole team joined us, Guy-sensei. The man nodded enthusiastically. Excellent idea, onward, shouted Guy once again. Naruto nodded and swung his blade in an arc over his head. All the blades that made it up separated. Naruto then began grabbing them as they fell and placing them in their proper holster on his back. Tenten was giggling like a little schoolgirl and had hearts in her eyes. The blade, it's so amazing, she said as she giggled even more. Naruto smiled at that and proceeded on his way. A mountain, that was all that could be said about the piling bowls that were stacking up in Ichiraku. Neji and Tenten stared on in both fascination and horror as both Lee and Naruto devoured bowl upon bowl of ramen noodles. Guy looked in his wallet, keeping tabs on how much he could spend. Stop, he shouted as if the buzzer to end the contest they were in. Ayame, the ramen girl, walked over and began counting the bowls. I'm sorry Lee-kun, but Naruto-kun appears to have more bowls, she said with a small smile. Lee looked down ashamed. So Naruto has my eternal hip rival entered your team in the Chunin exams? Asked Guy enthusiastic. Naruto looked down at some of his ramen. You know, I'm not really sure if he has or will, said Naruto in a slightly depressed voice. Guy stopped all antics as he listened to the tone in the boy's voice. Guy considered himself to be the sort of father figure to both Lee and Naruto. He had spent some of his best years teaching them and learning about them. The point being, he learned to read between the lines when it came with Naruto. The boy kept his problems to himself and didn't drag others into it. But he had one flaw. If something were bothering him about a subject, his tone would tell you. He didn't do it on purpose. No, it was just a habit of his. I see, well, don't worry about it, shouted Guy, patting Naruto on the back. Excuse me, Naruto-san, said a young Chunin walking in the stand. The Hokage has asked for your presence. Naruto looked over at the young man and nodded. He then proceeded to get up. It was nice to meet all of you. Lee, I'll catch up with you later, said Naruto. No, said Lee. Naruto looked shocked at this. What? asked Naruto confused. We will catch up now, said Lee with a stern face. I will come with you and we shall discuss youthful tales of interest. Naruto face faulted and rubbed the back of his neck as he gave a small chuckle. Okay then. With that the two of them left. Well, that was interesting, said Tenten to Neji. I never knew Lee was so close to someone. Yes, it is so youthful, shouted Guy as comedic tears fell down his face. He then wrapped his arms around his two remaining students. Listen, consider this a personal favor to me, but make an effort to get to know Naruto. He's had it rather rough and doesn't have many friends. Tenten looked at her sensei curiously. Neji responded though. I've heard rumors about him around the Hyuga compound, said Neji. Guy frowned at this. However, I saw him return little Hanabi, and now she adores him. Guy smiled. Hanabi was a bright subject for Neji. He held the main family with barely hidden contempt, but he absolutely adored Hanabi. It was truly odd. She had been the only one to worm her way into his heart. It was her personality. She went against everything the Hyuga tried to make in their clan members. Neji knew this was only possible because of how Hinata protected Hanabi and raised her. He knew this about the heiress but still couldn't find it in himself to not hold her in distaste. Some wounds would not heal so easily, and though it was not really her fault, it was still her kidnapping that cost his father his life. How is little Hanabi? Asked Tenten with a smile. Neji let a rare smile grace his features. She's doing fine. Well, my youthful students, I must leave you for I have business to attend to, said Guy leaving the booth. Temari let out a sigh as they drew closer to the gates of Konoha. On her neck she wore a silver-white feather on a necklace. The feather was simply beautiful, looking more like some exotic jewel than a piece of a bird. Are you nervous? Asked Gaara. Temari let out another sigh. Yeah, I mean come on, I'm about to meet my future husband, said Temari. I can't believe father did this. I met the old man that is the Hokage here, said Gaara. I'm sure his choice in your suitor will be adequate. That's right, you were here not that long ago, weren't you? Quote, if you're done talking, we're here, said Kankuro. Temari gave another sigh and entered the village with her brothers. It was really a beautiful town, but she found it hard to enjoy. What if he's a total jerk, or worse, a pervert? Thought Temari. Gaara led them towards the Hokage Tower. Having knowledge of the village's layout, they arrived in no time. Two guards stood in front of the tower and eyed the group curiously. We are here to see the Hokage, said Gaara. One of the shinobi disappeared then reappeared in a poof of smoke. The Hokage has confirmed your appointment, said the shinobi. You may proceed. Guy walked towards the memorial stone with a serious face. As he approached, a patch of silver hair could be seen. Kakshi stood in front of the stone with a sad face looking down at the names engraved upon it. If anyone has the right to hate the Kyuubi, it's you, said Guy appearing behind him. The beasted your fiancé won and your sensei died to seal it. Kakashi remained silent. His face was growing ever darker and a tear threatened to spill over his eye. Rin, sensei, thought Kakashi. You made promises to your friend Obito, never to abandon a comrade, said Guy continuing. You've lost so much, however. Kakashi looked up at Guy as his words hung. There was a tear in his eye at some of the painful memories. Kakashi was pro at keeping his emotions hidden. He had had dreams, nightmares, and haunting flashbacks of his past. They always got to him, but they never made him cry. It would be unprofessional. Naruto is not the Kyuubi, stated Guy. Kakashi looked back down, his face darkening. I consider that boy to be no less a son than I consider my student Lee. Kakashi remained in silence as he listened to the words of his friend. He has done nothing wrong, And I know for a fact he has done nothing for you to consider him a demon, said Guy. Hate is hard to forget and sadness is eternal. How much hate and sadness do you think that boy has already experienced? Please Kakashi, the only reason I do not hit you right now for what you've done is because I know why you did it. Just give him a chance, said Guy. If you don't now, you'll only end up going through more emotional pain. And with that, Guy left the Junin to ponder his thoughts. Temari stood in front of the old man Hokage, her brothers behind her for emotional support. Sarutobi just smiled at her. Miss Temari, I hope you understand that this is not some sort of punishment, said the Hokage. Naruto-kun is not even aware that this marriage is being arranged. We're not getting married right now, right? Asked Temari, growing ever more nervous. The old man chuckled. Is that what you are worried about? Well, do not worry, Naruto-kun is still a little young. And besides, why don't you two get to know each other a bit first? Temari nodded, feeling a bit more sure about this. If he's a pervert, all you, said Temari, forgetting whom she was talking to. The old man just let out another laugh. Your father was right, you are a bit hot-headed, said the Hokage. She blushed a little, angry at the comment. If you had said that in any other village, it might have been considered a declaration of war. A nervous smile came to Temari's lips at that. However, before she could comment, a knock was heard at the door. Ah, Naruto, you may come in, said the Hokage. As he spoke those words, Temari immediately looked towards the door. It slowly opened and in walked a young man with pitch black hair done in a ponytail. He was rather tall and fit, but his most distinguishing feature was his eyebrows. Temari's eyebrow twitched. What the hell is with those eyebrows? She shouted in her mind. She could hear Konkuro snickering behind her. Temari calmed herself down. She wasn't so shallow she would judge by looks. All things considered, if the eyebrows weren't there, then the boy would be quite attractive. She took a step towards him to greet him when she stopped. You called me old man, said a voice from behind the boy with the eyebrows. His words might have been considered disrespectful, but his tone was kind and generous. A boy with blonde hair walked in behind the eyebrow guy, and Temari felt her breath get caught in her throat. He had beautiful blonde hair and a charming face. His body was fit and the boy was definitely handsome. He gave a smile to the old man that sat not far behind her. It was warm and kind, and Temari felt her face heat up. Welcome, Naruto. Let me introduce to you Subaku no Temari, said the old man. Naruto turned to her and gave her a warm smile. Hello. Hi. Temari blushed. Naruto stared at the blonde girl now in front of him, confused. She seemed mesmerized by something. Her face was rather red and she seems to be trying to compose herself. He didn't know what it was, but he could sense a good feeling coming from the girl. He gave her a smile and her face grew even redder. Well, Naruto, we have a lot to discuss, said the old man from his chair. Temari, I suggest you listen as well, this is very important. Temari finally regained herself and turned to the old man, giving him a curious stare. Well, now where to begin, said the Hokage, trailing off. Naruto, both the Kazekage and I are on good terms, however that does not mean our villages are. Naruto regarded the old man, trying to see what he was getting at. Are you saying we are close to war? Asked Naruto. The old man smiled and shook his head. No, we aren't even considering that a possibility, this is more of a civilian matter. They aren't exactly too accepting of the sand, and it is vice versa as well. Naruto began placing things together. So far all he could think of was that the Hokage wanted him to make peace between the villagers of Konoha and the villagers of the Suna. A small frown came to Naruto's lips. There was no way he could convince the villagers to make peace with Suna when he couldn't even convince them to make peace with himself. I don't see how I can help you, Hokage-sama, said Naruto. The old man just gave another one of his grandfatherly smiles. The council and I both feel that an arranged marriage is in order, said the Hokage. We plan on having both you and Miss Tamari wed once you reach 16. Naruto jaw dropped for a moment. With all due respect, old man, but is that really fair? Asked Naruto. Given my situation, to force Tamari-san into this could be dangerous. Naruto let his words hang there and the Hokage finally dropped his smile into a sad frown. I am well aware of your situation, Naruto. We will deal with that when we come to it, said the old man. But I would like to direct your attention to something important. It is the reason you are the best candidate for this arrangement. The Hokage then turned to Tamari. This goes for you to miss, said the Hokage. Gaara, Lee, and Kankuro stood back away from the three. Their role there was unimportant and they seemed to have faded into the background a bit. However, this did not mean they were any less curious as to what was going on. You see, Naruto, you undoubtedly know that you are the last of your clan. Because of this, it is a requirement that you practice polygamy, said the Hokage. Naruto raised an eyebrow in question. However, Tamari seemed to have understood what it meant. Her face grew to a shade of red that was thought unmentionable, a characteristic that was so unlike her. I can see you don't understand, said the Hokage. What it means is, you are to take on multiple wives. The council has been told of a few matters and I believe that this will benefit you, said the Hokage. Old man, I'm sorry but I don't think I can do any of this, said Naruto. He seemed to unconsciously grip his stomach as he said this. Something that didn't go unnoticed by those in the room. Not only does it not seem right but also, I think it would be best if we had this conversation in private, said the Hokage. Tamari, Kankuro, Gaara, and Lee all nodded and began to leave. Before Lee got out the door, Naruto grabbed his shoulder. Wait for me outside, okay? Said Naruto with a small depressed frown. Lee gave him a reassuring smile and nodded. Naruto then turned to the Hokage. Naruto, what is bothering you? Said the old man worried. If it was me, I would be jumping at the idea of taking on multiple partners. I'm sorry, old man, said Naruto. I just never planned on getting married. The Hokage gave him a curious look. Naruto, surely you had some intention on carrying on your clan. Naruto shook his head. My plan was to serve the leaf alone until my dying breath, said Naruto. He gripped his stomach once again. I accepted it some time ago, that because of her, no one could ever be with me. Naruto, said the old man shocked. Had the boy given up all hope of ever being accepted? If so, then why was he serving the leaf so loyally? The Hokage knew of Naruto's good nature from the moment he saw him open his eyes. But even so, he never thought the boy would go so far as giving up his own happiness. It just proved the old man had made many mistakes concerning the boy's life. And besides, to force Tamari-san to marry someone she doesn't even know, then expect her to allow multiple women to come in, said Naruto. Seems rather perverted of you, old man. Naruto said this with a small smile, trying to lighten the mood. As I've said before, old man, I'm sorry but I do not think I could agree to this. It wouldn't be fair to anyone involved. Anime and manga. The Hokage gave a sigh. I would never force you to do something you didn't want to, Naruto. You do not have to do anything you don't want to, said the old man. Just please consider it, if only to make yourself a little happier. Naruto gave the man a thoughtful look behind his shaded glasses. Naruto then turned around and walked out the Hokage's doors. Once Naruto exited the office, he was greeted to the sight of Lee as well as the trio from the sand. He was surprised at the sight of Gaara, finally taking notice to the boy being there. He recalled their fight and could tell that Gaara didn't seem to know who he was. It made sense, considering Naruto's face was never revealed during their fight. Naruto didn't know if Gaara had changed or anything. And given Naruto's secrecy when it came to his bloodline, he decided it best if Gaara not know who he was. The blonde walked over to the girl from the sand and gave a polite bow. I'm sorry that you wasted a trip, but I do not think it would be right if you married me. Perhaps it would be better if you found someone else, said Naruto. Temari seemed taken aback by this. Her face grew red not from embarrassment or attraction, but anger. She soon had her fan off her back, still folded up, and smacked Naruto on top of the head with it. Naruto's eyes were wide, as were most of those present. Who are you to decide what I should or should not do? Said Temari, grinding her teeth together. I decided to do this for the good of my village, and I already decided that I would not do it unless I got to know the person. Naruto looked at her curiously, and confused. He had not expected her reaction to be so violent. I've decided that you are a good candidate for my fiancé, so let's get to know each other. Any objections, bucko? Naruto shook his head, frightened. Good, said Temari. And with that she stormed off, her brothers following her soon after. Naruto watched her retreating back, still in a state of shock. The state he was in grew even more chaotic when the image of the girl bathing in the stream in the desert overlapped Temari's retreating form. An intense blush burst forth on Naruto's face as he stared down, embarrassed. The Sand Sibs exited the Hokage Tower. Wow, that kid got showed what's what real bad, didn't he? Said Kankuro with a huge smile, as he was on the verge of cracking up. I didn't think you were so into the idea of marrying this guy. What changed your mind? A warm feeling that occurred here, said Temari, placing her hand over her necklace and heart, when he showed up. Gaara's eyes widened at where Temari placed her hand. Your heart. No, baka. This thing, said Temari, lifting up her feather attached to her necklace. I don't know what it means, but when he entered the room the thing got real warm and started vibrating. I didn't say anything at first because I was preoccupied. You mean distracted by the kid's good looks? Said Kankuro with a snigger. He was soon floored by Temari's fan. Naruto exited the Hokage Tower not long after the Sand Sibs left. By his side was none other than Lee, who wore a goofy grin. So what does this mean? Are you engaged? Asked Lee. I'm not sure, said Naruto. His head was spinning with all the events that had taken place in the short amount time. Naruto's pace quickened unconsciously. Lee followed in silence. It didn't take long before they came upon Naruto's neighborhood. It was definitely in the bad part of town. The area screamed slums, and Naruto was one of the few unlucky inhabitants forced to live there. The Hokage had offered to have him moved to a nicer part of Konoha, but Naruto politely declined. Moving would only cause more problems than were necessary. He was told that his father had left a home meant for their clan, but until he made Junin and reached the age where he could come in the open about his clan, he wasn't allowed to live in it. It didn't take long before Naruto and Lee were finally at his home. It was by far the worst apartment in the district. Profanity was graffiti on his door. Demon, monster, these were just some of the things written on his door. Cracks littered the sides and walkway. It was a pigsty, but it was home for him, and he was glad to be there. As he drew closer, he became aware of another presence on the other side of the door. He gave Lee a warning nod and the boy took out a kunai for the ready. Naruto slowly opened up the door, being cautious as not to make a sound. Then at the last moment he flung it open and charged in, taking one of the switchblade parts to his first Tsurugi. He lunged forward but stopped short and blinked. In front of him was a frozen Haku with wide eyes and a freaked out look on her face. Both of them blinked at each other. Oh, hi Haku, said Naruto, frozen in place. At that moment Zabuza appeared, and since Lee didn't recognize any of them and only saw the large sword on Zabuza's back, he attacked. Zabuza's eyes went wide as he was sent through a wall. Lee landed in front of the hole in a crouched position and gave a victory cry. "Hiya!" shouted out Lee. "Lee, relax, I know these guys," said Naruto. Lee blinked and looked on as Zabuza slowly got up looking pissed. "Oh, sorry," said Lee. "What the hell?" shouted out Zabuza. "Sorry Zabuza-san, I wasn't expecting anyone to be in here, so when I felt your presence Lee and I took precautions," said Naruto. "Oh, I guess that's understandable," said Zabuza. "But why are you guys here?" asked Naruto. It was Haku who answered. "Well, you see, the Hokage gave us the okay to stay, but he never exactly got us a place to live, and well, me and Zabuza are both broke, so we dropped in. I hope that is okay, Tenchi-san." Naruto blinked again. "Well, I guess it is, but I don't exactly have a lot of room." "Don't worry, we will only be here temporarily," said Zabuza. Haku gave Naruto a smile in approval. Naruto nodded to both of them, giving them the okay to stay. "So, you guys want dinner?" asked Naruto, going over to his cabinet where he kept all the instant ramen. Before either of the two could answer, their stomachs spoke for them. Naruto gave a small laugh at this, and made 52 cups, one for Haku, one for Zabuza, and Naruto and Lee took 25 each. As they ate, Lee had no problems telling a very interested Haku all about Naruto. Naruto of course had no clue this was going on. He was currently talking to Zabuza about sword training. "I don't really know about training, you're actually about on my level, and I don't know the style that you use," said Zabuza. "However, we can always have practice spars." Naruto nodded in agreement. He then looked around the apartment and for the first time noticed it was clean. "Haku-san, did you clean my apartment?" Haku had the decency to blush. "Well, you see, I thought that if I was to stay here I might as well make myself useful," said Haku. "Yoshi, that was most youthful of you," shouted Lee. Naruto's eyebrow twitched at his enthusiasm. Lee-san, do you live here as well?" asked Haku. Lee shook his head. "I have my own place, but Naruto and I often stay at each other's houses," said Lee. Haku raised an questioning eyebrow. "That way we can head straight to the training grounds together without having to wait for the other." Haku nodded in understanding the relationship between the two boys. They were close friends that obviously did a lot together. "So Haku-san, I'm curious, are you going to be instated as shinobi?" asked Naruto. Haku shook her head. "No, technically Zabuza-sama and I are supposed to be dead, so we can't really leave the village." "Oh, then what will you to do for money?" asked Naruto. Both Haku and Zabuza looked at each other, sending the other a questioning glance. "Well, we haven't exactly thought about that just yet. We may go see the Hokage tomorrow about that," said Zabuza. And that's how most of the conversation went on for the night. They all spent a lot of time talking. Naruto didn't notice, but Haku was scooting closer to him as the night went on. Zabuza did notice and wondered what got into his pupil and daughter. It didn't take long before they had all decided on the sleeping arrangements for the night. Haku took the bed while everyone else got the floor. It was simple and no one argued. Well, Lee sort of did when he asked why they couldn't share the bed with Haku. He was hit over the head by Zabuza for saying that. Kakashi sat up in his bed sweating and panting heavily. He had had another nightmare of his beloved. He looked over to her picture that he kept next to his bed. His mind couldn't get off what Guy had said to him earlier. He brought a hand through his silver hair and stilled his breath to regain his control. He still wore his mask, but he was currently without a shirt. His one scarred eye was held shut but exposed for all to see. He then opened it and looked over at his old team photo and the boy whose eye he now had. Those who break the rules are trash, but those that abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Those words echoed in his head. He then looked over at his new team photo, the one of Team 7. It had been taken not that long ago, and despite his feelings toward the Kyuubi child, he still managed to look happy in it. And he was technically happy. He was proud to have both Sakura and Sasuke on his team. Naruto was the only grievance he could not put behind him. There were just so many things about the boy that filled Kakashi with both anger and pain. The boy had the appearance similar to that of his old sensei. It was as if the Kyuubi was mocking the memory of a great man by taking his form. But Naruto isn't the Kyuubi, is he? Thought Kakashi, remembering all that had been said to him by Guy. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. It was hard on him to think about all of this. It was like a chain of events, thinking of Naruto and the Kyuubi. It caused him to think of Rin and his sensei and what they would do. And thinking about others that were close to him and what they would do caused him to think of Obito and his father. How would they handle the situation? The images of all those he cared about and how they each met their bloody end assaulted Kakashi's sanity. Was he cursed to forever be scarred by those images? His father drenched in his own blood with a knife jammed in his heart, Obito's body being crushed by a boulder and the boy giving his eye to Kakashi, Rin running towards him only to burst into flames as the Kyuubi sent a fire technique towards her and a platoon of shinobi, and of course his sensei, defeating the monster on top of the toad boss's head. Gambunta disappearing and Kakashi watching his sensei Arashi drop to the ground lifeless in a sea of blood and fallen bodies of his comrades. Kakashi clutched his head and leaned against the window next to his bed. Everyone, what should I do? Naruto was staring out at the moon on his balcony. It was a rather odd feature to his apartment. It made no sense that his apartment was such a dump yet had such a convenient and well-managed balcony just outside. But Naruto chose not to question the way the world worked and accepted it as one of the few nice things he was allowed to have. He watched the night sky quietly with a peaceful smile on his face. He closed his eyes and let his mind wander. It was during this that Haku snuck up on him. Tenshi-san. Naruto opened his eyes and turned to her. Yes, Haku, do you need something? He asked. She walked closer and shook her head. Not really, I just saw you out here and wondered if you wanted some company. I'm fine, you don't have to stay out here in the cold with me if you don't want to. I don't mind, she said, giving him a small blush as she looked down. But there was something I was wondering. Naruto raised an eyebrow signaling that he was listening. Well, you see, I was wondering if maybe you could show me your wings again. Naruto was taken aback by her request. He then looked around and felt for others present. He could tell no one was watching and no one even lived in the direct buildings that surrounded his, so he had little chance of being seen. After he determined all of this, he nodded. He took off his sunglasses and put them down, revealing his beautiful glowing eye. He then proceeded to remove his white night shirt. As he did so, Haku blushed. He then doubled over and sent chakra to his back. Not long after, his wings burst from his back in all their glory. Haku gazed on in amazement at the sight of them and Naruto smiled. She walked up to them and grabbed a feather as if fell. She gazed at it and its unique shine in the light. May I please keep this? She asked, mesmerized by the feather. Sure, I guess, said Naruto as he drew his wings into his body. He gave a small grunt as they went in with a snap. Does it hurt to do that? She asked. Only a little. I have a very high pain tolerance, he said. His remark only seemed to give her a more worried look. Well, have a good night, Tenshi-kun, she said, leaving. Yuta Haku. Kurenai stood in front of her longtime friend. So you're worried about the Kyuubi kid? Said Anko. Don't call him that, said Kurenai defensively. It was early in the morning and she was still tired. Yeah, whatever, said Anko, waving her hand as she chewed on some dango. Just watch your step around him. A lot of people tend to threaten demon lovers. Anko, don't say that. Listen, I personally don't give a damn about the kid. He can be an angel or a demon, it doesn't affect me and it's none of my business. Beside, I got enough grief without having people hating me for being a demon lover. Just don't hold it against him. I won't. As I said, I don't give a damn about the demon, just that I prefer not to be seen with the Gaki. Kurenai let out a sigh. Even if her friend had no hostility towards Naruto, openly admitting that she would rather ignore him could be just a bad. Personally, Kurenai didn't know what it was, but she desperately wanted to help Naruto. Or at least find a group in her peers that would be able to help him should he ever need it. She looked back over to her friend and noticed the purple-haired woman brought her hand up to the mark on her neck. She bit her lip and in a breath. Does it hurt? Asked the red-eyed woman. Only a little, said Anko, flashing a grin. Kurenai still gave her a worried look. Listen, don't go butting into everyone's problems, you'll only end up worrying others. Sorry, but you know how I am. I know, and I'm grateful for all you've done for me. Just be careful, okay? Said Anko in a very serious voice. Kurenai nodded, but any further discussion was interrupted by a small bird that landed on their table in front of them. On its leg a small note was present. Kurenai took it and read the note. It seems we are requested at the Hokages, said Kurenai. Anko got up with her friend and they took off towards the Hokage Tower. Old man Sarutobi stood in front of the gathered Junin, waiting patiently for their final guest to arrive. And sure enough, Kakashi arrived in the room only a little late. Sarutobi had purposely told him the time of the meeting was 2 hours earlier than it actually was. Everyone present noticed that Kakashi looked a little more sluggish than usual. No one seemed to know the reason for this, but seemed to pass it off as a trick of the light. The old man Hokage gave a cough to signal that the meeting could now begin. Well, now that we are all here, I would like to discuss the upcoming Chunin exams, said the old man. I was wondering if we have any recommendations for genin that are not already considered eligible. The Junin looked around, and sure enough, the first to step forward was none other the famous green beast of Konoha. Guy stepped forward. I, Myota Guy, recommend my team of youthful independents for this exam. He flashed everyone in the room a toothy grin that seemed to sparkle. As a response, everyone's sweat dropped. The Hokage gave a sigh to regain his composure. All right, who else? He asked. I recommend Team 10, said Asuma. I recommend Team 8, said Kurenai. Almost all those present were shocked at the recommendation of the rookies. All except the Hokage, who was now secretly watched Kakashi out of the corner of his eye. Anime and manga. Is there anyone else? Asked the old man, his sight never once leaving Kakashi, who seemed to be deep in thought. Hokage-sama, said Kakashi, drawing attention to himself. I would like to recommend my team as well. People were a little surprised at this. They knew that the prodigal Uchiha Sasuke